Okay, so you've shared some really fascinating material with us today, mostly drawing from Katherine Schafler's book, The Perfectionist's Guide to Losing Control.
That's right. It's a really interesting take.
Yeah, it seems like it. So, our plan for this deep dive is to really unpack perfectionism, which, let's face it, often gets a bad rap.
Definitely. It's usually framed as something negative, something to just get rid of.
Exactly. But we're going to explore the idea presented in these sources that maybe it can actually be a powerful force, something working for you.
hmm Helping people understand that drive in a new way.
Right. And one of the first things Schafler says that really jumped out at me is that perfectionists, well, they aren't always balanced people.
And that's okay.
And that's okay, yeah. Which is kind of counterintuitive to a lot of wellness advice we hear.
It really is. She argues that just blindly following generic ideas about balance, if they don't actually fit you, well, that's not really healthy.
It's just being obedient, as she puts it.
Yeah. Which makes you question that constant push for balance. Is it truly the right goal for everyone?
It makes you think. And what's interesting is how that rigid pursuit of balance can itself be, well, another form of perfectionism.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The book really highlights that societal pressure, to hit this perfect equilibrium.
Mm-hmm.
And it notes how that pressure seems to fall maybe more heavily on women.
Absolutely. Which leads us straight into that societal framing, doesn't it?
It does.
The sources point out this constant message, especially for women, to kind of curb their perfectionism, to be perfectly imperfect. Have you noticed that pattern?
Oh, for sure. It feels like a very gender dynamic sometimes. I mean, think about well-known male figures, maybe Steve Jobs or Gordon Ramsay.
Right. Known for being intense, demanding excellence.
And they're often framed as geniuses, as
Yeah.
visionaries. Their perfectionism is almost part of the legend.
Yeah, it's seen as pushing boundaries. But then you look at women with similar traits, are they celebrated in quite the same way? Unconditionally.
Well, the book brings up Martha Stewart, which is an interesting example.
Mm-hmm. Built an empire on meticulousness, right?
Exactly. But, as the sources note, her focus is largely on homemaker interests, cooking, decorating, entertaining.
So it sort of raises the question, is society more comfortable with female perfectionism when it stays within those, traditional lanes?
It seems possible. Is that drive okay as long as it fits a certain mold?
Yeah, because you don't often see women demanding that same level of precision in, say, tech or finance, getting the same kind of uncomplicated praise. Usually there's some other narrative attached.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And this connects to what feels like a constant stream of messages telling women to be less.
Right. Way less, want less, be less emotional.
Say yes less, be less of a perfectionist. It's always less is more, but maybe it subtly discourages, full throttle ambition.
It feels like this deep dive then, based on this material, is kind of pushing back. It's not about less, it's about more.
Getting more of what you want.
Yeah, by being more of who you are, including understanding these intense drives.
Which takes us to a really key idea in the book.
Which is?
What if your perfectionism isn't just some flaw? What if it actually exists to help you?
Okay, that's a big shift in perspective.
It really is. The book asks that question directly, instead of seeing it purely as a problem.
What if it has a positive intention underneath?
The book uses this idea that some gifts, some strengths, can feel like burdens at first.
Until you understand them.
Exactly. Until you figure out their purpose and how to work with them. Perfectionism, with all its intensity, might just be one of those.
And to help with that understanding, the book talks about 5 different types of perfectionists.
Yes, exactly. It identifies these 5 types as a way to help people unlock the gifts within their tendencies.
Okay.
And redirect that energy more constructively by figuring out your type.
You can work with it, not just fight it.
Precisely. For example, there's the classic perfectionist, driven by order, things needing to be just right.
Okay, I can picture that. Strength and meticulousness.
Yeah, attention to detail. But the potential downside, if it's unchecked, could be rigidity, maybe anxiety.
Right, makes sense.
And the book stresses that each type has this potential upside and a potential pitfall. The key is self-awareness.
Knowing your tendencies so you can lean into the strengths and navigate the challenges.
Is understanding what's really driving that need for excellence.
So ultimately, the aim seems to be about changing how we approach control in our lives. Something about superficial control versus real power.
That's a core theme. Moving from superficial control, like micromanaging every little thing,
Yeah.
rigidly sticking to plans.
Which sounds stressful.
Oh, yeah, often leads to stress, burnout.
Towards real power.
And what does that look like?
It seems to come more from deep self-awareness, trusting yourself, being able to navigate things effectively even when they go off plan. It's more of an inner confidence.
Ah, okay. So superficial control is managing the outside to feel okay, but real power is feeling competent inside. That's a great way to put it. Yeah. And it's crucial to say up front, this isn't about fixing something broken.
Right. The book makes that point.
Explicitly. It says, if you're looking for a guide to fix your broken parts, this might not be it. The perspective is that even if you have habits you see as self-destructive.
Which perfectionists sometimes do.
Exactly. It doesn't necessarily mean there's something fundamentally wrong with you.
That feels quite validating, actually, especially for people who tend to be very self-critical.
It challenges that idea that any struggle means you're flawed at your core.
Yeah.
It encourages shifting from what's wrong with me to more of a curious, okay, what's actually going on here?
A more compassionate approach.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's dig back into that idea about perfectionists and balance. The author shares her own example of a perfect night, right, which sounded pretty intense.
Yes. That anecdote is really illuminating. She's basically showing how subjective balance is.
That forcing yourself into some external definition of wellness or balance might not work.
Exactly. It can feel totally inauthentic, even counterproductive. For some people, a really packed, productive evening is energizing. It feels good, even if it doesn't look like winding down.
So it's about finding your own equilibrium, not chasing some ideal that doesn't even feel right to you.
Precisely.
Yeah.
The book even makes this really bold statement like, I don't know one balanced woman,
Wow. Okay.
suggesting that maybe this perfect equilibrium is a constantly moving target, especially for women juggling so much.
And this pressure, the sources argue, isn't really applied equally, is it? Like the hot mess label.
Right. That seems to get slapped onto women much more readily if they look like they aren't managing everything perfectly smoothly.
Yeah, I've noticed that. A woman juggling things might be a hot mess, but a man doing the same.
Might just be seen as busy
Mm.
or focused.
There's like an underlying expectation of visible composure for women that maybe isn't there in the same way for men.
But source material points out, dad guilt isn't really a thing in the same way mom guilt is.
That's true. Men aren't usually bombarded with messages that they should feel bad for prioritizing work, for instance.
Exactly. It highlights those ingrained expectations around caregiving and domestic stuff.
And the book connects this back to ambition, suggesting that this focus on women achieving balance might actually subtly limit them. How does that work?
Well, the argument goes something like this. If you channel women's drive and energy into this endless quest for balance, and then pathologize any imbalance.
You kind of keep them busy with that.
Yeah. And you implicitly reinforce the idea that maybe they shouldn't be doing too much or wanting too much. The pursuit of balance becomes another rule, mostly for women.
So it could be a way of maybe intentionally tempering their power, keeping them from fully stepping into it.
That's the suggestion. That it makes you wonder if the push is always purely about well-being or if it also serves to maintain certain structures.
Interesting lens.
The source suggests this messaging can lead women to scatter their energy trying to achieve this possibly unattainable state.
While also feeling guilty about their natural desire for achievement.
Exactly. Internalizing healthy ambition as some kind of flaw or like they aren't grateful enough.
So instead of chasing this potentially mythical balance, the book says, hey, maybe your perfectionism is trying to help you. How does it suggest we reframe that?
It's really about consciously choosing a different interpretation. Instead of just hearing that harsh inner critic, could you see it as, say, a deep drive for excellence, a desire to create something meaningful, a commitment to your values?
Changing the story you tell yourself about it.
Yes. Moving it from the enemy category to the potential ally category.
Okay.
And identifying your specific perfectionist type, the book offers a quiz that helps you see the inherent gifts, the strengths often tied to that way of operating.
Right, we mentioned the classic perfectionist. What's another example?
There's the pleasing perfectionist,
Yeah.
often driven by wanting approval, avoiding criticism.
Okay, I can see the potential downside there, maybe overextending yourself.
For sure. But the flip side, the potential strength, could be an amazing ability to anticipate what others need to create harmony.
So even things we see as negatives might have a positive aspect.
Exactly. It's about seeing both sides.
And this all leads back to shifting from that superficial micromanaging control
Yes.
towards real personal power. What does that shift involve? What are the steps?
It seems to involve building up your internal resources,
Yeah.
like a stronger sense of self-worth that isn't just based on what you achieve.
Okay. Not tied solely to external validation.
Right. And also the ability to be really present, engaged in the moment.
How does that help?
Well, the book argues that when your sense of value comes from inside and you're truly in what you're doing, that intense need to control every little external thing tends to lessen.
Because you trust yourself more.
Exactly. You trust your ability to handle things, to navigate challenges from a place of inner strength, not just rigid plans.
That makes a lot of sense. If your foundation is solid internally, the external pressures maybe don't hit quite as hard. The book even says something really direct at one point, like, number 3, you're perfect.
Yeah.
Not perfectly imperfect, not good enough, you are perfect. That feels pretty radical.
It's meant to be, I think. It's provocative.
Yeah.
And the book talks about how much resistance that idea brings up in us.
Yeah.
We dismiss it, feel awkward.
But we're often quick to believe negative things about ourselves.
Exactly. So the message there is about recognizing your inherent worthiness, just as a human being, totally separate from your achievements or flaws.
And this ties into how we view our ideals. The sources talk about adaptive perfectionists understanding that ideals aren't meant to be achieved.
Right. Only meant to inspire. That's a crucial difference.
Can you unpack that a bit?
Sure. So maladaptive perfectionism gets stuck on achieving the flawless outcome, which is usually impossible, right? So it leads to disappointment, self-criticism.
Always falling short.
Yeah. But adaptive perfectionism uses those high ideals, like a North Star, a direction.
Something to move towards, but not necessarily a destination you have to reach perfectly.
Exactly. They fuel an inspired life, a continuous striving, but without that crushing weight of needing to hit some impossible mark. The growth, the meaning comes from the pursuit.
So embracing the drive, but letting go of the need for absolute flawlessness in the result.
That seems to be the idea, honoring the process, finding satisfaction in the effort, and acting according to your values, not just nailing the final product.
Celebrating the journey, not just the destination.
The book literally encourages celebrating the process, yeah. The small wins, the effort itself.
Wow. This whole conversation, it really feels like it reframes perfectionism quite dramatically.
It does.
Moving away from just seeing it as toxic and towards recognizing that if you understand it, if you manage it, it could actually be a huge source of strength, motivation even.
That really feels like the core message from these sources, doesn't it? Acknowledge the energy in perfectionism. Give yourself permission to even embrace it.
And then learn to work with it consciously.
Yeah. It's not about stamping out a flaw. It's about connecting with a strength and directing that drive toward what you really want.
So as people reflect on this deep dive, maybe consider this. The sources suggest you might already be perfect.
Right. Not good enough, not perfectly imperfect, just perfect.
And it's interesting how much resistance that simple idea can bring up, isn't it? We seem much quicker to believe the negative labels.
Definitely. And the material also really leans into that idea of ideals as inspiration.
That the unrealistic goals aren't necessarily meant to be achieved point by point.
But to pull you forward, to inspire action. Adaptive perfectionists, the book suggests, live inspired lives because they're always reaching for something bigger.
So maybe the key takeaway here is, instead of fighting your perfectionistic side, what if you tried to get to know it? Really understand it?
Give yourself permission to feel that energy, maybe.
Yeah, and learn to collaborate with it. The sources frame it not as fixing a flaw, but connecting with a strength. What could change if you saw that drive to excel not just as a burden?
But as a potential pathway.
Exactly. A pathway to getting more of what you truly want out of life.